Hi, James. This is Dr. Jester. Wanted to go over with you the assignment, the Developing World Annotated Bibliography. Let's take a look at that briefly. So you were to identify a minimum of 3 peer-reviewed journal articles that pertain to worldviews in the developing world. What do we mean by developing world? We're talking about places in Africa, Asia, some locales in Latin America, a few other isolated places where their way of seeing the world is very different than ours would be in North America, or, for example, countries in Europe and elsewhere. Um, so, for example, in Papua New Guinea, their worldview is very different from what it would be in Australia, even though they're in close proximity. For example, a Native American individual that lives on the reservation has a different worldview than someone who lives in an urban environment, so they perceive things differently. How do they view time? How do they see the life cycle? How do they relate to their in-group? For example, in the Western world, it's very individualistic. Me, I, mine. In their world, it's we, it's us, it's ours. So they get their group identity from their uh, belonging, their ethnic group, their tribe, their clan. We get that here from basically self-development and the immediate environment that seeks individual achievement. How do they view the supernatural world? Are they focused on the power to survive these evil spirits that come against them? Or are they someone in this country who does not see such a world? In this country, we go to doctors. In some of these places, they will rush out to a shaman to try to find out what's going on. Why is their loved one sick? They don't look at that as caused by a virus or a microscopic bug. They look at that as caused by an evil spirit. Maybe someone has done something to them, put a curse on them. So shamanism and witchcraft are very important in finding the power to overcome. So in the aspect of developing worlds, you're going to want to find sources that speak to that and help you to understand what that worldview entails in some of those places and how you, as a visitor there, taking the gospel as a missionary or as a short-term mission worker, how can you develop the right way of understanding so that what you're saying in communicating the gospel does not sound foreign and alien to those people? You learn to communicate using their forms and methods. And so then when they hear it, it looks somewhat familiar, but you've changed the meaning around to present it with the true meaning of the gospel, to let them know that the gospel does meet their aspirations, and doing that in culturally appropriate forms. Now, looking here at the sources you've used, you've got the deconstruction of population, politics, and environment towards a sustainable development. Okay, so environmental degradation, global sustainability, they are important. Who are they important to? Well, they are certainly important to Westerners. They're important to us because we understand what's happening. You take someone in the developing world, such as, let's particularly pick out a country like Nigeria in West Africa, where they don't think about the degradation of the environment when they're chopping down trees to make firewood and then burn that for coal so that then they can have cooking fires to eat their meals, because they're concerned about what their needs are right now. They're not looking into the future. So the question then becomes, you seem to be approaching this from the point of view, how can we care for God's creation? That's certainly a Western Christian worldview that maybe we need a developing world to understand a little bit better. But going back to the topic, how is this helping you to understand their worldview? So you need to make it a little bit clearer how these particular sources are going to contribute to your knowledge in ways that help you to communicate the gospel in such cultures and contexts. For example, ecclesial opposition to mining. Again, the church's concern is that the commercial mining will degrade the environment to the point that it will endanger the people's livelihood. Yeah, that is the church's concern. So it suggests alternative programs for the poor here again, how is that helping you to understand their perspective? It seems to be informing your perspective from a Western Christian worldview perspective, but it's not telling you a whole lot about their worldview. At least you're not telling me how it does. So I need to hear that a little bit clearer. Digitizing worldviews, intangible cultural heritage. Here, digitizing and recording intangible cultural heritages in the multicultural world will safeguard cultural heritage and enable the continuous sharing of cultures. What do they mean by intangible cultural heritages? How does that speak to you? What are those things? I like the preservation of stories. Certainly, these cultures are very oral. Their way of communicating their perspective and their life view is through parable and story. Preserving those, that's all good. What is that saying to you then about the way they see the world? That's what you're trying to grasp in these articles. And that's what you need to communicate, not only describing your summary statements here by giving the thesis and basic points of view of the journal article, but then how does that contribute then to my understanding of developing world perspectives? Okay, so that needs to be revised where you're communicating a little bit more about what this means. What does it say to me about the developing world? That's what you're going to want to respond to. So some of these, rewrite just a little bit on the back end of some of these items and explain how those really help you understand third world, developing world perspectives. Developing world is a preferred term over third